Welcome to Fire Up Your Life with Tony Fitzgerald. Hey, Greg.
Hey.
Welcome to my podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I wanted to start with a quick introduction. I was looking at your website with your bio, and of course, I know you a little bit personally, but I wanted to just read to the audience. Congressman Steube's life has been defined by service. Prior to being elected to Congress, Greg served for 2 years in the Florida Senate and 6 years in the Florida House. Before his involvement in politics, immediately after graduating from University of Florida with both undergraduate and law degrees, Greg answered the call to serve in the War on Terror following the September 11th attacks. In Congress, he currently serves in the House Committee on Ways and Means and the Select Subcommittee on Weaponization of the Federal Government. He represents the 17th District, which covers all of Sarasota County, Charlotte County, and portions of Lee County. Greg lives in the Sarasota area with his wife Jennifer, son Ethan, and their rescue dogs, Luke, Leia, Chance, and Maddie.
It's very important to get the rescue dog names in there.
Well, it is, because I didn't know they were rescue dogs.
Yeah, all of our dogs. So Jen is the chair of the Sarasota Humane Society. They actually have a big event coming up. So we're big on rescues and go to the shelter for that type of thing. But Jen's always been real involved in the Humane Society.
That's great. We just did an event there where we, with Women's Council of Realtors, we went there and, fed the dogs and did, pet the cats.
Yeah, and there's a ton of different, Sarasota has the Humane Society that Jen's a part of. And then you've got you got all these other different sanctuaries and some of them are specific with the breed of dogs. Like there's a Greyhound rescue.
Yeah.
We try to, my wife is very big on not buying from breeders.
Yeah.
So there's so many dogs out there that need to be adopted.
That's funny that you say that because we have a golden and we were looking at a breeder and it was going to be really expensive. And I ended up buying it at auction at our mother's house. It wasn't an auction. It was a bid. What was a bid, right? It was it was a live auction. And I knew when I walked in, we were going to end up with that, but it ended up paying for a mother and her kids stay for 2 months at our mother's house. So it's much better than buying from a breeder.
Absolutely.
And we got a cat named Loki from one of them too.
Nice.
Was Luke and Leia anything with Star Wars? Or?
Yes, they're brother and sister. So I thought it was appropriate that we
perfect, because I'm a big Star Wars fan too.
A brother sister name there.
That's funny. Well, that's great. My kids love your dogs. So
yes, they do.
They're great.
Yeah.
Yes. Now I wanted to hit on real quick September 11th and that you served in the U.S. Army, and that was a really powerful day for America. I was on duty that day when that was happening, and my chief called me and said, "Hey, there's been a small airplane into the World Trade Center," of course, because that was the first confirmations, and I had to guide my whole crew through that day while we knew our brothers were in harm, watching it from a distance, not being able to help. And I can imagine, I really want to thank you for your service.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, everybody it's hard to believe now that kids weren't born when it happened because it's been so long ago now, over 20 years. And everybody that was alive and saw that happen, remember where they were when it happened, because it was such a significant piece of history in America. And I was in my first semester of law school. And when the first early reports came, I went to the University of Florida. And back then they had like a student center that had one TV. And so everybody was kind of crowded around that one TV watching the video come in. And we had, in my class, I had several reservists in my class that ultimately ended up getting called out. And I viewed it as my generation's opportunity to serve. I didn't have plans or an idea to serve in the military when I went to college. When September 11th happened, I felt called to serve. And I graduated law school a year early, tried to get through that as quick as I could, which I don't recommend anybody do because your grades are indicative of trying to rush through that. And enlisted, went as an infantry guy, did basic training, officer candidate school, infantry officer basic course, airborne school. I got injured in Ranger school. And because of my legal background, because I was already a lawyer, I branch transferred from infantry to JAG and then did the rest of my service in the military, in the JAG Corps. But because of the infantry background, so as a JAG officer, it's kind of a weird, it's odd for you to have prior combat service experience, especially being an infantry officer. So I always got assigned. I was assigned to an infantry division, the 25th ID. That's who I deployed with. We were deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom 06 to 07. And then when I got there, became the chief of detainee operations because that infantry background was good to have for the missions that we were going to be serving on. So it completely changed the trajectory of my life that day. And I think there's a lot of Americans that it changed the trajectory of their life.
I agree. I mean, that was a day like Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
That was very much similar. So yeah, the whole JAG thing's probably a whole nother podcast. That's probably very
it's
interesting,
a long
right?
conversation.
I wanted to ask you, based on what we know about you, what was when did you decide to become a congressman, and why? What was it that pinnacle moment that said, this is what I'm going to do?
Yeah, I'm not one of those guys that always wanted to be in politics and got a poli-sci degree and, that sort of thing. I actually had zero political ideas to get into politics, even in college. It wasn't until my senior year in undergrad that, because of my ag background, so my bachelor's degree is in beef cattle science, I have a minor in agricultural law. I just wanted to be a cattle rancher and work on ranches. And I started seeing the effect of individuals getting involved in ag policy and agricultural policy, and had the opportunity to actually lobby the state legislature as a Florida cattleman. I was part of the Florida Cattlemen's Association, and realized that there was a lot of members that had no idea the impact that agriculture had in Florida. So I started getting involved politically. I was the student senator for the College of Ag. I was an ag ambassador in the college, and then there was this internship opportunity that the college sponsored for a congressional office, and I just applied and interned. And the congresswoman who I interned with is now a lobbyist on the Hill, so I actually still communicate with her. It's kind of funny. 20 something years later, that would have been 2000. So 23 years later, the congresswoman who I interned with is now a lobbyist, lobbying members of Congress. And that's kind of where I caught the political bug, if you will, and decided to go to law school. And then in law schools, when September 11th happened, it took me into the military. And it still was a piece of things that one day, maybe I would run. And it just so happened that when I was looking to get out of active duty, I had done my 4.5 years. The state house member in my home district where I grew up, and my dad was sheriff in Manatee County at the time, was retiring. And the timing just kind of worked out. I decided that I didn't want to do another term in the military. It's that first 3 to 4 years that you kind of, are you going to make it a career or you're not going to make it a career? And so I decided to get out. Within 6 months, I announced I was running for the state house, and did 6 years in the state house, 2 years in the state Senate, and got elected to Congress in 2018. So I wasn't one of those young guys that knew that was something I always wanted to do. Even in college, I didn't really get that interest until probably my senior year in undergrad. And then I just thought, I went to law school because I thought that would be a good background to have as a legislator. I don't think all members of Congress or legislators should be lawyers, but I certainly think it helps tremendously when you understand the impact of the words you're using when you craft legislation.
Yeah, words are powerful. I
Yep.
mean, just even in real estate contract, I mean, words are powerful.
Yep.
And one person's words can mean something completely different if you don't spell it out correctly.
Yep.
So we find that all the time. During that journey, what would you say was the biggest obstacle for you, or something? Was there anything that you had to overcome, or what would you say was a big obstacle?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were like, the biggest obstacle, especially from the military to getting into Congress, and I can talk about the obstacles there too, but it was, you just went to law school. Why in the world would you give up 8 years of your education to go be? I literally enlisted as an E4, an infantry guy. So a lot of it was doubt and people saying you should just go be a lawyer. Why would you do that? Or you should direct commission and not be an infantry guy. And then when you get into politics, everywhere you go is an obstacle, because you announce that you're going to run and you're going to have a primary, and in an open seat, you always will. I had 3 or 4 in the primary in my first House race. And you just have to have confidence that that's the direction you want to go. And then you get through a primary, then you have a general election. And every year, I think there was only 1 year in the state house because we're up every 2 years that I didn't have an opponent. And then the obstacles become within the establishment, if you will. So when I decided to run for the Senate, there were 5 candidates that decided to run, and 4 of them were all like legitimate candidates, either former county commissioners, state house members, um, and you have everybody saying and trying to tell you not to run for a variety of reasons. People that your opponents are affiliated with. I had people within the establishment and political circles that were against me. Every race I've had the arms of PACs and that kind of thing against me, but I've always felt that that's what God's been calling me to do, and pushing through that, and knowing that if that's where God wants you, He's going to provide for you, and He did every single time. My congressional race, the one of my opponents in the primary was heavily supported out of Washington D.C. I think he raised like 800,000 in dollars out of Washington and the kind of the establishment, if you will. And I had one organization that believed in me, the Club for Growth. It's a conservative economic organization that supports candidates, and they have a PAC. And I'd get a phone call, and they say, "Hey, we just did a media buy, and we're putting 400,000 in a media buy for you." And at every point in time where I needed that boost, that organization was there for me. Outside dollars would come in, and those were some significant obstacles. But every time God provided where I needed just as much as I needed, and have been very successful in all my races. Like that particular race for Congress wasn't close. I think I won by like the primary by like 20 something points. The last election in the general, I won by 65% of the vote in the general. So even you're as you're walking through that, you're questioning the decision you're making. You're doubting if you're going to have the ability to do what you need to do, and you just got to keep your head down and work hard. When I ran for the Senate, I knocked on 20,000 doors, and wholeheartedly believe that that was the difference, because that was a much closer race, and there was 5 people in the race, and it really separated you. Maybe especially in a primary with 5 people, there's probably issues that most people agree on, and the difference for people would be that guy knocked on my door. And that has a huge impact on people. Even if they don't agree with you with some things, I still have people come up to me today at events that'll say, "I don't know if you remember, but 6 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, you knocked on my door and asked my vote. You're the first politician ever to knock on my door, and you're the last politician to ever knock on my door." So it has an impact, but it certainly, when you're walking through that, are challenging.
That's that's definitely powerful. It's very personal, and it's interesting. You say door knocking. In real estate, there's a lot of realtors door knocking. So listen, if there's any realtors like 20,000 doors, you can go knock a neighborhood, right? So
Yeah. Start in
that's
your neighborhood.
that's amazing. That's amazing. Um, I wouldn't have. I imagine there's so many things that when you enter politics, that life is just a very different life because you see things from a totally different perspective,
Yeah.
and you've got a lot of obstacles that pop out, and I'm glad that you rely on your faith. I'm sure there's a lot of prayer that goes into that.
And not just prayer that we pray, but like there's a lot of people that support what we do. And I get messages and letters and all sorts of things about people praying for us and praying for the direction of our country. And it's powerful.
It is. It is. Have you leaned on faith your entire life?
I would say my faith has grown like exponentially in probably the last 4 or 5 years, through things that I went through personally, and through just the churches that we ended up with. And that has been a huge building of faith. And I've always considered myself a Christian, but the last 4 or 5 years has really impacted greatly. And going through some of these trials, going through the election and the things that you deal with on a daily basis as an elected official. I mean, all you have to do is look at my Twitter page or my Facebook page to see all the people that don't agree with you and the nasty things that they say about you. Uh, um, you have to have a confidence to walk through that. And it has certainly, my faith has grown exponentially in the last 4 or 5 years.
And I know that you even pray on, in the Congress with everyone.
Yeah, when we went through the whole speaker's race that happened at the beginning of this year, I'm part of the prayer caucus, and it's all these things are bipartisan. I'm part of the prayer caucus, and then I'm part of the prayer breakfast, which meets on a different time. And there was groups in the prayer caucus. I think it was like the 12th vote for speaker or the 11th vote for speaker, and late nights and long days, and there's a lot of division on our side of the aisle. Um, we thought it would be good to pray and on the floor, and there were 7 of us that ended up being there, and the picture's been circulated around. But what's fascinating about that is the next vote after we prayed, there were 20 of the 26 that were holding out that switched their votes. And I joked with one of the guys afterwards. I'm like, we should have done that the first time. We should have
Yeah.
prayed first. But then you become a target too for the enemy, because you're putting yourself out there, you're putting your faith out there, and that was a very public thing that we did because all the press was on the floor that day. So that picture circulated around, and but when God is on your side, the things that you accomplish through prayer, I think is very, very fascinating.
Absolutely. And I hear I'd like to relate this to business too, because not everyone's going to run to politics or just even having a family or anything. I hear your common theme is a lot of things pop up that um, you have to get over, and leaning on faith. Is there any things that you would say to uh, anyone out there going through a struggle that has come up? What would be your best advice to that person?
Yeah, leaning on the word, leaning on your church, leaning on your brothers and sisters, and prayer. Like we're going through an instance right now on our property with building a barn that has been frustrating and challenging, and that the enemy is trying to like get in there and cause problems. And prayer is powerful. Getting in the word is powerful. It There's not a circumstance in human nature or in human history that isn't addressed in the word of God. And that can be very helpful to the circumstances. Like one of the things that we had talked about earlier today, where a family lost their child. I mean,
Yeah,
I can't imagine as a father, I can't imagine living that, and the circumstances of what happened. And you just got to lean on your faith and the word of God to get you through situations like that.
absolutely. And speaking to that, I'll leave the details out, but our school lost a 8-year-old boy, and so the classmates are suffering, the family obviously is suffering, the teachers, and it requires a large community and a lot of faith to get through something like that. And the principal of the school, he has to be a leader and he has to treat everybody. And uh, and if you're by yourself and you feel like you're by yourself, it's very hard to do. So when you're leaning on your community that are reaching out, like we prayed for them today, and it's important to have that backing, so that you know that you're not alone out there.
Yeah, and the kids. I mean, the kids in that class to have to deal with that, and the
Yeah.
parents of the kids in that class. So those kids are going to need um, some some mature guidance, and the best place to get that from is the Word of God, and relying on our faith to help build those circumstances like that.
Absolutely. I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but you just overcome a pretty big personal struggle too. And you're looking really healthy and a
Yeah, it was
sight.
miracle after miracle in that circumstance. I was trimming a tree and probably 25, 30 feet up, and got knocked down. I had a significant concussion. I tore the ligaments in my neck. I had a huge concussion, and puncture of my lung on my left side, and then I broke my pelvis on the right side. And it's only been 12 weeks, 12 weeks almost to the day, because I had my X-ray yesterday, my 12-week X-ray, and the pelvis is healing. I don't have any residual on the concussion, other than the neck being sore occasionally, which is, as the muscles heal, that's just going to happen. And the lung, I don't have any issues. God's hand was in all of that. He put an Amazon driver in front of my driveway at the exact appointed time that he needed to be there. Had he been 5 seconds earlier, I'd have waved to him and he'd have gone about his day. If he'd have been 5 seconds later, I'd have been on the ground. He would have never seen me in the back part of the property. And all the things that God put in place that day from a miracle perspective. And then, paramedics were there in 8 minutes. They happened to be in station, which it's a busy station because we live out in a rural area and they get called out a lot. They were there, and we have a trauma center here in Sarasota. And so there was just piece after piece after piece that lined up that got me the care I needed when I needed it right away. There was a trauma surgeon who I served with in Congress that said, because I was laying face down and had this huge, basically blood clotting in my lungs, that if I'd have laid there for a couple hours, I would have asphyxiated on my own blood and passed. And it would have been hours before my wife would ever come out, because I'm always out doing stuff around the property. And it would have been hours before she'd have come looking for me because I didn't come in. So um, miracle after miracle in that circumstance. I wouldn't say I'm 100%, but I'm very close to that. I got cleared yesterday to do full impact. I hadn't been able to run or do anything like that. So now that the pelvis is healing, I'm cleared for that. Can get back to normal activity. It's a build, because when you break your pelvis, it takes time for that to heal. But miracles all around that, and probably going to be. Originally, the doctor said it'd be 3 months before he'd let me walk on it, and I was like, no, that's not going to happen. But 12 weeks out, we're in a very good place.
It's great. I saw you throwing some baseballs.
Yeah, I did some practice at the high school on Monday.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm glad to see you out there. I know you got a congressional baseball game coming up in June.
One of the fun things that we get to do, June 14th. You can watch it live on Fox Sports or on C-SPAN. And the Republicans play the Democrats. It's a game that has been going on since, I think it's 1903 or 1908. So there's a lot of history behind it. We actually get to play in Nat Stadium. So to play a baseball game in a professional MLB stadium is a lot of fun. And I pitch for the Republicans. So being on the mound in a stadium like that. And last year we had like 30,000 people that came to the game. So it's a very fun experience to kind of take you away from the division that is what's going on in Washington today.
That's good, and that's good that you guys get to get some camaraderie out there, even on both sides of the lines, where you're doing things other than fighting each other on a political floor.
Yeah, I've actually gotten to know a lot of my colleagues on my side just because we're in practice in the mornings together, and so it does build. You have that connection with other people that you otherwise wouldn't have. It's great.
Oh, I appreciate it. What I'm really hoping people get out of this and listening to you is that no matter what your struggle is, there's another side to the struggle. There's through the storm, and God never calls us into the storm; He calls us through the storm. He's never going to leave us there. And these things increase our faith exponentially.
100%.
It's no pressure, no diamonds. God's creating us into what we need to be. And talking back about the family that lost their child, I was listening to Dr. Jordan Peterson, and he said it was something a little profound, where it was a lot profound for me. You look at that and you can't imagine how somebody could go through that. You just can't imagine. I lost a daughter at 8. She was 18. She was hit by a drunk driver. And it seems so far away now.
Yeah.
It never gets easier, but it gets more distant. But I do think, when your child is so young, it's so hard. And what Jordan Peterson said is, we can never imagine being in those people's shoes because God hasn't increased our faith for that moment. And when those things happen and you lean on God, God increases your faith that much for that moment.
And He'll give you what you need to get through it. He'll provide what He needs to provide to give you the strength to be able to overcome. And it's amazing. And the type of things that can happen. And you talk to people on after they've walked through that. There was a couple that I know that lost a young son who was hit by a car. They didn't know he had gotten out of the house, and he got hit by a car and died. And they wrote a book about it, how, it was difficult, but God saw them through it, and they saw blessings as it resulted. The gentleman that actually hit the young boy, and he obviously didn't mean to do it, is now a pastor. I mean, there's just a lot that happened because of what happened, and they have great comfort knowing that their son is in heaven with the Lord, and they feel their book is a testament to all the struggles that they went through.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Um, I really want to thank you for being on this show. I know you're
Of course.
busy.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how busy you were till I talked to all the people that I had to talk to
Yeah.
to make sure we could arrange this, and it's great. And I just want to thank you. And I hope that if anybody is watching, that you're not alone.
Yep.
If it's hard, there's another side.
Mhm.
There are people that will come around you and take care of you. You just have to look for it and make sure you raise your hand. Don't be silent, because there would be a hole in the world without you.
Yep.
So thank you again. I
Yep.
really appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me, and appreciate the opportunity, and thanks again.
Thank you.